Okay, so current build for those of you that want it. Talents on the old skill tree are as follows. Reap with enhanced and acolytes reap in order to be able to generate a corpse under the enemy that you hit with reap. The first one that you hit with reap puts a corpse on the ground. If an enemy that I hit with reap dies within a couple of seconds, then I get 30% attack speed, which is kind of nice. Then from here we get 1 rank of blight, which I've got a couple other ranks from item contributions, with enhanced blight that slows them, and you and your minions deal 15% increased damage to enemies that are blighted, with the objective being that you want to put blight underneath their feet to keep them, taking extra damage. We max out Sever, along with Enhanced Sever, damages enemies along its path for 25% of the initial damage, and then every 4th cast of Sever makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. So the idea being that you would reap whoever you would need to reap in order to get the damage reduction, and the corpse generation, and the extra attack speed, if you can get it, along with Sever after you blight them. So you would blight them, and then you end up using a different skill. Hold on, we'll just keep going down through the tree. Sorry, this sounds fucking confusing. My brain is all over the place. We get Corpse Explosion with Enhanced Corpse Explosion, radius increased by 15%, as well as Blighted, which is like the blighted bullshit that you see on the ground that I put down, the big cloudy stuff, which hopefully they fix the particle effects on. We get 1 or 2 ranks of Decrepify, Enhanced Decrepify that says if you get a lucky hit, enemies hit while afflicted with Decrepify have a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. And then lucky hit, enemies hit while afflicted with Decrepify have a 15% chance to reduce your active cooldowns by a second. So if you get lucky hits on these, you end up reducing your cooldown, and you also end up stunning them for 2 seconds when you get a lucky hit. But the lucky hits are all based off of the dots that these other skills are doing, right? So Blight is doing a dot, Corpse Explosion is doing a dot, and then so Decrepify ends up proccing off of all of that stuff. You also end up grabbing Grim Harvest. Consuming a corpse generates 6 essence, which was nerfed from 9. And Fueled by Death, 9% increased damage for 6 seconds after you consume a corpse. So you consume corpses, you get extra damage, right? And then Hued Flesh, your damage, any damage that you do has a 12% chance to generate a corpse. So corpses everywhere, we like corpses. That way we end up stacking up a whole bunch of Corpse Explosion miasmas, and they take increased damage the more Corpse Explosions they stand in. Which is why the objective is to get the boss, if you're fighting them, to get stunned out or stand still, so that they're standing in a whole bunch of those like zones, all stacked up on top of each other with a blight under their feet, so that way they take enhanced damage. So if you're going to engage something, assuming that you don't need to use a cooldown to keep yourself alive, you would blight them, then Decrepify, or either or, and then start hitting Sever until you're empty of essence. And then you would start using Corpse Explosions in order to be able to generate essence from the Grim Harvest, and also to stack up the dots, right? Necrotic Carapace, when a corpse is formed from your skills or your minions, fortify for 6% base life. From your base skill, you generate a corpse with Reap, you get a little Fortify. So you keep doing that, every handful of seconds, you kind of like walk around in a circle, you hit them with Reap, you generate a corpse, you pop the corpse. That way you get the little Fortify stacks. So ult, Bone Storm, and there's a reason for this. Sometimes people end up swapping this out for Blood Mist instead, which is fine, but we use Bone Storm for now because of the gearing that I have. Prime Bone Storm, we take this point to reduce the damage that you take by 15% while Bone Storm is active. And then we take Supreme, increases critical strike chance by 20% while Bone Storm is active. All of those are good. And then we take Standalone, increases damage reduction by 18%. Reduced by 2% for each active minion. We have no active minions because we sacrifice all of our minions, which I'll get to in a second. And then Memento Mori, sacrificing skeletal warriors and mages increases their sacrifice bonuses by 60%. And then last but not least, we end up taking Shadow Blight. Shadow damage infects enemies with Shadow Blight for 2 seconds. You and your minions deal 10% bonus damage, and every 10th time an enemy receives shadow damage from you or your minions, they take an additional 725 to 886, or 22% of the damage that I dole out from shadow damage. So Shadow Blight is massive, does a ton of damage. And then on the passives, we get Gloom, we get Terror, and a couple of points in each of these, Crippling Darkness, and 1 point in Reaper's Pursuit, because we're really just using that to get into the other points. I'm still missing 2 points. I need 1 from here, 1 from here, actually 3 points, 4 points. So I'm missing 4 skill points from Renown. You want to get the 3rd mark of all your Renown stuff, which I haven't done yet. In here, I would probably put 1 point in Decrepify, and then, or 2 points in Decrepify, and then 1 point in either one of these, in both of these, and then that would kind of max out the talent build. On the Paragon side, where I'm at now, you do the main board attachment. I ended up putting control in this slot and then making sure that I had 40 points of intelligence to be able to get the extra bonus damage. And then you go to the wither board and then work your way over to the legendary wither node, because that way it's augmenting shadow damage. In your Book of the Dead, you go with Reapers, 15% increased shadow damage. You sacrifice the Reaper Warrior so you get more shadow damage, because it's all about shadow damage. You sacrifice Cold Mages, 15% damage to vulnerable enemies. And then you sacrifice the Blood Golem for extra life. And then on the gearing, this is how I've got it geared. Like the basic idea is that you want to focus on generating more shadow damage, more dot damage, more shadow damage, damage to vulnerable, damage to crowd-controlled enemies. All of those will play into it, because this build is all about making stuff vulnerable, crowd-controlling them, slowing them, and stunning them out, right? And freezing them, actually, because of how this is built. So there's a couple of like key items with how I've got this itemized. The first is this Sacred Unique called Bloodless Scream. It's a two-handed scythe. And the key note on here is that your darkness skills, which are all of the shadowy like damage things, are all darkness. So darkness skills chill enemies for up to 40%, and then on lucky hit, it generates more essence for me. It's a 100% chance on lucky hit. Every time I get a lucky hit, I get more essence. But I'm not focusing so much on the essence as much as the chill, because if they're chilled, they're crowd controlled. If they're crowd controlled, I do bonus damage to anything that gets crowd controlled. I also do bonus damage to anything that takes shadow damage from any of my darkness skills. So it's just like a bunch of cascading damage, right? The second is 2 affixes for Bone Storm, and then there's other stuff for Shadow Blight. So the reason why we have Bone Storm is because there's an affix that says, this one right here, that says Bone Storm is a darkness skill now. Instead of being just a physical damage skill, it does darkness. It's a darkness skill. It deals shadow damage. So because it does shadow damage, again, it feeds off of all the other abilities. Enemies damaged take 246 shadow damage over 2 seconds. And then there's another one that says every time that Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain a barrier equal to 4% of your base life for 10 seconds. So the barrier comes first. All the damage that I end up taking goes to the barrier first. So you run into a big pack of mobs, you pop Bone Storm, you can't die for the entire duration of Bone Storm. You make sure that you decrepify everything that is around you whenever you possibly can, because you want it to proc off of the damage that you're doing on Lucky Hit to give you back cooldown reduction, right? You want to reduce it by that second as much as you can, and then you just murder everything by popping corpses and hitting them with Sever, okay? And then the rest of this is like stuff that augments Shadow Blight, augments Sever, and gives me like a little bit more survivability. So every time I do damage, I get extra armor. Shadow Blight key passive increases the Shadow Blight's damage within 10 seconds by 34%. It stacks 5 times. So again, you know, hitting large groups of enemies, you just keep doing scaling damage. And then the other saving grace here that I have is if I damage an enemy, I get a barrier for 2,000 HP. So all of this basically makes it so that I can survive while I'm putting up a shit ton of dots, chilling them, slowing them down, and then eventually freezing them if they live long enough to be frozen, right? And that's kind of everything. Yeah. You do 113% increased damage for 6 seconds after the Shadow Blade key passive damages enemies 10 times, which happens constantly, right? That pretty much just has 100% uptime every time I engage anything. And then this last one, Critical Strike from Sever, have a 30% chance to spawn a pool of Blade under the target. The only thing that I'm missing, and the only thing that I really would want to add to this, is there's an affix that says the pools that are created from Blight act as vacuums and they pull enemies into them. That's the only real thing that I'm missing. If I can find that affix, then that would end up going in this build too. But that's pretty much the whole build. It works out really, really well. Yeah, that's it. So there's the build, and it's fucking amazing, and it dunks on shit. So, all right.
It was a race to win.